In his book, Outlive Your Life, popular Christian author Max Lucado makes the following observation. He writes, "Long before the church had pulpits and baptistries, she had kitchens and dinner tables. Even a casual reading of the New Testament unveils the house as the primary tool of the church. The primary gathering place of the church was the home. Consider the genius of God's plan. The first generation of Christians was a tinderbox of contrasting cultures and backgrounds. At least 15 different nationalities heard Peter's sermon on the day of Pentecost. Jews stood next to Gentiles, men worshipped with women, slaves and masters alike sought after Christ. Can people of such varied backgrounds and cultures get along with each other? We wonder the same thing today. Can Hispanics live in peace with Anglos? Can Democrats find common ground with Republicans? Can a Christian family carry on a civil friendship with the Muslim couple down the street? Can divergent people get along? Well, the early church did. Without the aid of sanctuaries, church buildings, clergy, or seminaries, they did it so through the clearest of messages, the cross, and through the simplest of tools, the home. Not everyone can serve in a foreign land, lead a relief effort, preach a sermon, run a committee meeting, or volunteer at the downtown soup kitchen. But do you have a front door? A table, chairs, bread for sandwiches, a coffee maker perhaps? Congratulations. You just qualified to serve in the most ancient of ministries, hospitality. Something holy happens around a dinner table that will never happen in a sanctuary. In a sanctuary, you see the backs of heads. Around a table, you see the expressions on faces. In the sanctuary, one person speaks. Around the table, everyone has a voice. Church services are on the clock. Make sure it doesn't go past an hour. Around the table, there's time to talk. In our modern age, church has become a place we go to, but it was not always this way. Such compartmentalized faith was foreign to the first Christians. They brought Jesus home with them, and the good news flourished. How might we do the same? Bringing Jesus home with us. This is something of what I'd like to reflect upon this morning. Today we stand on the verge of another annual holiday season. The year having passed by, at times almost like a blur, it seems, the mad rush will soon be upon us once again. Thanksgiving, then Advent, Christmas, New Year's. It's a time rich with imagery and meaning and tradition and hope, but most especially for most people, it tends to be a time particularly focused around home and family. As Perry Como croons each year, "Oh, there's no place like home for the holidays." And taking his words to heart, we call one another, we write, we travel, we get together, we remember. So much of what this holy season is all about and what it ultimately means to us is tied up in home and family with all that that means, both good and bad. Something in this time instinctively draws us home. Like the Holy Family over 2,000 years ago traveling to their ancestral homeland of Bethlehem, we each in our own way literally or figuratively journey home. And as I was thinking about this journeying home in this time, I got to wondering how we might make this time more powerful, more what it is meant to be, more filled with God's presence, more than just the annual descent into some tired old ritual, a sentimental journey perhaps, and more a time truly filled with God's living presence in our homes. The secret, of course, as Lucado's words remind us, being not just to journey home, but to be a people who deliberately, intentionally take Jesus home with us. So how do we do this? Well, this is what our text today explores. In our reading this morning, we see Jesus make a house call. In the text, it seems like an insignificant little moment, some filler that links us to the next important thing that Jesus is about to do. However, if we look more closely, we quickly discover that this visit is a vital moment in the story. Because in this scene, we are made to see for the very first time the combination which will mark Christianity throughout, namely church and home combined, public faith and private faith as one. Following Christ, not just a 9-to-5 gig, but a job you take home with you. Essentially, in our text today, as Jesus moves from synagogue to home, he makes it clear to all who will come after that he's not just looking to meet us here, say at St. John's, at 2000 Florence Avenue every Sunday morning. No. He intends to stop by our homes. He needs to go there. It's an interesting visit and one not without its challenges. What do we learn here about bringing Jesus home with us? A few thoughts. Thoughts in the form of a couple of questions for us to keep before us as we prepare to journey forth into this holy season ahead. Question number 1. Are we ready to have Jesus stop by? In the text, Jesus spends the morning teaching in the synagogue and then heads over to Simon Peter's house. Now, we don't know how this visit came about. Was it planned ahead of time? Was it a spur-of-the-moment kind of thing? Did Peter extend an invitation? Or as Jesus did with Zacchaeus, did he kind of invite himself? We don't know. But as the scene opens, I can't help but wonder what was going on in Peter and in his whole family at this moment. I mean, if it was a planned visit, how much time and energy had they put into getting things ready for it? Cleaning the house from top to bottom, preparing a special meal, the way we all do whenever company is coming over. If it was an unplanned visit, well, then what was Peter living in fear of walking in on at home, Kids running around, screaming, fighting. Wife giving him a dirty look for bringing home company unannounced, Oh, thank you very much, Mr. Holy Man, Haven't got time to stay home and help with housework, right? Remember, they didn't have cell phones back then, praise the Lord. They didn't have cell phones, so Peter couldn't call his wife from the synagogue and say, honey, I'm bringing home the Savior of the world for lunch. Whenever company comes over, planned or unplanned, there's always a certain amount of disruption. Why? Because we want to put on our best face, present ourselves in the very best possible light. We clean, we stick things away in closets, we bring out our best. Things become slightly unreal, at the very least outside the norm. A very different us shows up, the person we want to be, the person we want our guests to believe that we are. Well, imagine for a moment having Jesus stop by your house for a visit. What would you be frantically cleaning? What would you hide away? What special things would come out that don't normally see the light of day? And understand, I'm not just talking here about mopping the floors and dusting the knickknacks and pulling out the good china. I'm talking about attitudes. I'm talking about behaviors. I'm talking about the way we normally live with one another. Would we go on exactly as we are, or would we clean up our act in any way? If Jesus was sitting at your kitchen table, would you just go on talking to your spouse the way you always do? Those nasty, hurtful comments, the little sniping remarks, born of some grudge so ancient no one even remembers the cause? If Jesus said, how are things at work and at church? Would you give him all the gossip you normally talk about? Would you try to draw him into laughing at the people you laugh at and disliking the people you dislike? If Jesus said, where's your teenage daughter? Would you be comfortable replying, she got pregnant out of wedlock, so I kicked her out, telling her never to come back? If Jesus said, where's your son? Would you unflinchingly reply, I don't approve of his life, so I told him he's not my son anymore? Would you be good with that? This kind of stuff happens in Christian homes every day. Would it all be as it is, or would something, anything, be different? Would we be different from who we normally are because he was there? And if there is something about ourselves, something about our home, anything that we would change, if Jesus were present because we believe that is the person he wants us to be, then why aren't we making those changes right now? This is the first question of inviting Jesus into our homes this holiday season, that we might experience his truly powerful presence as it's meant to be. Are we ready for him to stop by, anywhere, anytime? Or nothing to be hurriedly stuffed under the sofa cushions, nothing to be quickly swept under the rug. No anger, no selfishness, no condemnation, no judgment, no self-righteousness, no sin. And if not, what are we going to do about it this holy season, that we might truly experience all that it means to have him born among us? In his book, The Luck of Roaring Camp, author Bret Harte tells the story of Roaring Camp, which supposedly was the meanest, toughest mining town in all the West. More murders, more thefts. It was a terrible place inhabited entirely by men and one woman named Cherokee Sal, who dies while giving birth to a baby girl. Well, as the story unfolds, the men take the baby and they put her in a box with some old rags under her. When they look at her, though, they decide that doesn't look quite right, so they send one of their men 80 miles to go buy a rosewood cradle. He brings it back and they put the rags and the baby in the rosewood cradle, but the rags don't look right there. So they send another of their group to Sacramento, and he comes back with some beautiful silk and lace blankets. And they put the baby wrapped with the blankets in the rosewood cradle. This looks fine until somebody notices that the floor around it is filthy. So these hardened, tough men get down on their hands and knees and they scrub that floor until it's as clean as they can make it. Of course, what this does is to make the walls and the ceiling and the dirty windows look absolutely terrible. So they wash down the walls and the ceiling, they put curtains in the windows, and now things are starting to look the way they think they should. But of course, they have to give up a lot of their fighting because the baby sleeps a lot, and babies can't sleep during a brawl. So the whole temperature of roaring camp begins to go down. They take the baby out and set her by the entrance to the mine in her rosewood cradle so they can see her when they come up. And then somebody notices what a dirty place that is, and so they plant flowers, and they make a nice little garden there. Looks beautiful. And every day they each bring her shiny little stones and things that they find down in the mine. But when they put their hands down next to hers to offer their gifts, their hands look so dirty. So pretty soon the general store is all sold out of soap and shaving gear and perfume and those kind of things, and on and on. In the end, everything changes because of the baby. We're about to celebrate a birth. What's going to change in us? Question number one of inviting Jesus into our homes this holiday season, we might experience a really powerful presence among us. Are we ready to have Jesus stop by? Question number two then, where does the time go? Notice what it says in the text. That evening at sundown, they brought to him all who were sick or possessed with demons. That evening, at sundown. Note the inference. This is not just some brief visit by Jesus, him stopping in, to grab a sandwich and then to be on his way. No. He has spent the whole day there. He has lingered. And the inference is, for a fair amount of the time, nothing really remarkable or noteworthy was going on. It was just time spent together. And we see this pattern throughout Jesus' ministry. In his public work, he is always on the go, quickly moving from one event to the next. But when he gets to someone's home, he always lingers there. He gives time. Why? Because time is what makes home and family happen. In our fast-paced world, one of the great plagues of our age is a concept known as quality time. Parents often say, I'm going to spend some quality time with my children. Well, make no mistake, quality time is often really just a code word, and what it means is, I don't really want to spend a lot of time with you, so I'm going to take a little bit of time and cram it as full as I can with activities so that I won't feel quite so guilty about ignoring you the rest of the time. Quality time is important, yeah. But far more quantity time. This is what makes home. This is what makes family. Think about it in your own family. I know that for myself, the best moments that I always recall are not special moments, but rather those incredibly ordinary moments spent with everybody hanging around the kitchen table, Often hours after the meal was done. Still laughing, still telling those same old jokes we told 1,000,000 times before. Discussing, debating. There's no agenda. Just people being together. This being exactly what Jesus models here, in effect saying, this is a tremendous possession, a tremendous gift to give. This is what makes the kingdom. This is what makes me present. Time. Use it wisely. It asks of each of us, where does the time go? It is, how are we spending our time? In our homes, how might we better give the gift of time? No agenda, no objective, so that Jesus might better happen among us. In this holiday season, do you want to powerfully experience the presence of Christ in your life, in your family's life? Then amidst all the frantic busyness, make a point above all else to give to each other time. To stop and just be with each other. You'll be amazed at what happens. One author writes, "I'm here, Granny," Ricky announced. Mandy watched the small boy touch the old woman's hand and smile at her. Mom Perkins looked blankly at him and said nothing. Ricky didn't seem to care. He kept chattering away. "Can we take Granny for a ride to see the lights, Mama?" he asked. Mandy wondered what was the use. Her mother wouldn't know whether there were Christmas lights or not. She didn't know it was Christmas anymore, the season she always most enjoyed. They wheeled Mom Perkins to the activity room. There the nursing home's Christmas tree shone with twinkling lights and carols pealed forth from a CD player. "See the lights, Granny?" said Ricky, pointing to the colored lights. "And here's a Christmas ball. It has a picture of baby Jesus in the manger." Mom Perkins didn't respond, but Ricky kept talking. "She doesn't understand," Mandy felt like shouting at her son. "She's not the person I remember." Mandy recalled holiday celebrations of her childhood when her mother played such a prominent role. Then Ricky tugged at her arm. "Granny smiled at me, Mama," he said with a grin. "She likes the lights." "Yeah, right," thought Mandy. Listen, Mandy explained to her son. Mom always loved Christmas. She loves singing the carols and driving around looking at the lights, but she's not the same anymore. It would be a waste of time. Plus, we've got too much else to do, too many other places to go. We don't have time for this. Mandy's mother had once been the source of all her holiday joy, but now it just seemed to be a burden who almost sucked the joy of the season from her. Mandy didn't want to waste any time driving around looking at the lights. But as she looked at Ricky's pleading eyes, she was forced to give in. They loaded Mom in the back seat of the car and headed out. Ricky sat in the back with her and enthusiastically pointed out the lights all around them on each street that they turned down. Mandy grudgingly drove. But as she kept looking in the mirror to check on the two, she gradually noticed her mother's face seemed to brighten a little bit. Halfway down the 4th Street, she actually heard her mom quietly hum a bit of one of the Christmas songs on the radio. Mandy began to cry. It did still mean something to her, she realized. Mom was still there. Mom had brought Christmas to her once again, and it only took being willing to give a little bit more this year than she wanted to give the gift of time. Question number 2 of inviting Jesus into our homes this holiday season. Where does the time go? Which brings us to finally question number 3. Whose house is it anyway? In the end, it's been said that our text today contains the most amazing, most absolutely unbelievable miracle in the entire Bible. And just what exactly is this unbelievable miracle? Well, it is that Peter invites Jesus to heal his mother-in-law. How many son-in-laws would do that? Always the source of so much humor down through the centuries, the infamous mother-in-law. Right? What's the old saying? The clearest definition of mixed emotions is watching your mother-in-law drive off a cliff in your brand new car. Someone once observed that if you rearrange the letters of mother-in-law, you get woman Hitler. It's true. Now, obviously, we don't know how Peter actually felt about his mother-in-law. Maybe despite the stereotype, he loved her deeply. We don't know. Whatever, the scene begins with her healing, but it doesn't end there. Following this healing, Jesus then settles in for a meal with Peter's family and disciples, but as time progresses, it seems that word gets out that Jesus is there, and by the end of the day, Peter's house becomes overrun with people. And understand, I'm not talking about a block party here. What occurs is something a little more akin to triage. Peter's house becomes overrun with poor, sick, needy people. He's got the diseased in his living room, the homeless on his front lawn, and starving people rummaging around in his kitchen. Now, we don't know one way or the other, but my guess is that this was not Peter's plan for the day, right? It's not on Martha Stewart's Guide to Holiday Entertaining, right? Step 1, leave your own placemat. Step 2, have your house overrun with lepers. Right? Peter probably might have guessed this would happen, knowing what he does about Jesus. But like any of us, he was probably just looking to have Jesus over for some personal time together. And he gets that. But then it suddenly all becomes this much bigger thing, not just about him and his needs, but something out of control. Peter being asked to open up his house and to give. At the end of the day, Peter's house, in effect, becomes Jesus' house, a place specifically of healing. And that's exactly the point. It challenges us with our final question here. Whose house is it anyway? That is, we all tend to approach our faith from the standpoint of our needs and what we want to get out of all this. And that's natural. And Jesus gives us that. He provides for our needs. However, in this scene in which Jesus enters a home being the traditional place of the private and the deeply personal, keep it in house, we say. Jesus ends the day by refusing to allow the doors to this house to remain closed in any way. Jesus, in effect, blows this house wide open. He does this HGTV renovation, essentially saying, it cannot just be about you. This is going to be a place of healing. Like bookends, this is what frames this story. It's healing. Jesus turns Peter's house into a hospital. And that's the final point, that the kingdom of God, the work of Jesus, is about healing. Healing bodies, healing souls, healing lives, healing relationships, healing the planet. And wherever we are, if we're Christians, we are in the healing business. It asks of us, instead of just seeing our homes as places where as Christians we hunker down and hide from the world, how about we see our homes as hospitals, more Jesus' home than ours? Places where we look toward Christ's healing above all else. It asks, how is their sickness physical, emotional, spiritual, relational, that we in our homes, as families, can do something about. Particularly in this holiday season. That is, in our personal relationships, how is there healing that is needed? Apologies, forgiveness, contact. And will we pursue this? In our gift buying, how might we not simply give to one another, but make giving to others in need part of the celebration? In simply how we live in our communities, might we intentionally show a better way that points people to the Lord and heals hearts broken from God's love? In our circle of acquaintances, how are there people in need of healing, emotional and spiritual, and how might we in this season reach out to them? Basically, might we make this holy time not just about ourselves, but rather our homes, our families, about being part of God's healing work somewhere, somehow. In closing, consider the following true story. A number of years ago in a small Midwestern town, there was a man who loved to decorate with lights every Christmas. He took great pride in this, and his house was the talk of the neighborhood. People came from far and wide to see his tremendous display. There were white lights and colored lights and sculptures and figurines. And the centerpiece of the display, 4 giant flashing letters on the roof of the house that spelled out Noel, the French word for Christmas. Well, every year when the man set up his holiday light show, his son would help him. And one year when the boy turned 13, the father decided his son was old enough to be given the task of putting the big letters up on the roof. Overjoyed at being entrusted with this tremendous responsibility, the boy set about the task diligently, and he completed it in record time, following which he retired to his room, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. But no sooner had the boy come in from completing the task when the phone began to ring. The father answered. On the line was someone laughing. "Hey neighbor, interesting light show this year." Father hung up. Crazy crank calls, he thought to himself. Then the phone rang again. "Hey pal, after all these years, don't you know how to spell?" More laughter. The father wondered what was going on. He decided to put on his coat and go outside and look at his light display. Everything was there, intact. White lights, colored lights, sculptures, figurines. But then as he looked up to the roof, and what did he see? Not Noel, N-O-E-L, but L-E-O-N, Leon. His son had spelled the centerpiece of the whole display backwards. Livid, the father quickly ran and pulled the plug on the sign and then raced into the house and up to his son's bedroom. He banged on the door. "Son, I need to speak to you now." "Sure, Dad, come on in," his son replied. Bursting into the room, the father launched into a tirade. "What is the matter with you, boy? I give you one simple task, think you're man enough to do it, and you blow it entirely. You spelled Noel backwards. What's the matter with you? How can you make such a stupid mistake?" When the father finally paused to catch his breath for a moment, the boy replied, "It's not a mistake, Dad. I did it on purpose." "You did it on purpose?" the father bellowed. "Why?" And the son answered, "Well, Dad, you know how in school there's always that one kid who everybody picks on who never fits in? In my class we have one of those kids, and he always looks so sad. And I heard that recently his parents got a divorce. I saw him crying the other day. And well, he lives just up the street from us, and his name is Leon. So I just thought that if I put that sign up for him, he might see it every day when he goes back and forth to school and know that somebody is thinking about him and that he's important and that he matters." There was a long pause as the father just stared at his son, swallowed back tears. Then the father came over and put his hand on his son's shoulder and said, "I'm proud of you, son, very proud of you." And with that, the father went back outside and he plugged in the Leon sign, and it remained up for the rest of the season. And neighbors kept calling, and people kept laughing, but the father never enjoyed Christmas more. He knew his son understood what Christmas was all about. He was happy to get it wrong so that somebody else might get it right. He was overjoyed to help Leon find Noel. Oh, there's no place like home for the holidays. This holiday season, as you journey home, remember to take Jesus with you that you might experience a truly blessed celebration. Invite the Lord over for a house call. Ask, am I ready to have Jesus stop by? Where does the time go? And whose house is it anyway? Let us join together in singing our closing hymn, number 445, Happy the Home When God is There.